Okay, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have a cool review for you from the brand STERNGLAS. A little bit about them. They are founded in Germany by Dustin Fontaine in 2016, and it's an enthusiast-run brand with the goal of creating their own minimalistic Bauhaus watches and really making them available at a fair and affordable price point. And honestly, I did get a nice resurgence of interest within this brand when I saw their recent announcement for their upcoming Naos automatic Cambridge editions. So I wanted to check out some of their other more premium offerings because in the past I've definitely had my eye on them from an aesthetic standpoint, and from everything that I've heard, the build quality is also quite nice. I was just looking for something with just a little bit more of an updated movement, so I was really happy to see they actually had other 9000 series models such as this one. This is the Asthet and anthracite dial, and it's basically the brand's take on a modern Bauhaus style watch with a thin profile and a mechanical automatic movement. You can get this for $489 direct from the brand. I'd consider this an everyday dress watch. Some key characteristics and design: when you're looking for something that can be worn every day but still dress up pretty nicely, you're going to want, of course, something with that clean, classic, minimalist design, and of course something that's sensibly sized. So I think this could actually hit a sweet spot for a lot of you, especially considering the price point. At under $500, you're getting, an actual Bauhaus watch to come out of Germany. So I can appreciate that. And the brand is definitely run by enthusiasts, and you can really read that not just within their releases, but just their style and everything when you go to their site. So with that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay guys, so really cool watch. Some of the key kind of things that just jump out at me is this really sleek designed case. It has a bezel-less design. So this dial really pushes all the way out. And then of course, in kind of Bauhaus tradition, they have a really interesting way of kind of negotiating the space on the dial. Everything is spaced out really nicely, pushed to the far reaches, but then you also do have that beautiful kind of bowl-shaped dial that does rise towards the edges, which also gives you some depth and a little bit of visual interest within the parameters of that. This is a very minimalistically designed watch, right? It's just a couple of hash marks and everything like that, so you can keep reference of time. There's no numerals or anything, and there's very minimal text on here. And then even the handset themselves, kind of just the stick style. There's not much contouring to them. So this is a really minimalist design, and that's one thing that I can really appreciate about this piece, especially at this price point, is that for a watch that doesn't have a lot going on, it's not charging you a bunch. And honestly, I have some minimalist watches that do cost quite a bit, and they're not doing a lot in terms of complications, just 3 hands and a date. Same thing you're seeing here. So it is very cool, and the profile itself, again, they're just doing some interesting things. Look at that. That is really interesting and new. I like the undercuts there, which does help the watch wear and sit really nicely on the wrist. And then of course, look at how legible, even at really harsh angles, that dial is, thanks to the double domed sapphire crystal. So very cool. I am absolutely digging this one, and I'm happy I was able to kind of get it in hand. But definitely check the links down below so you can check out the newer release, which basically takes one of their more traditionalist Bauhaus designs and updates it and makes it more premium. So to match kind of similar specs here, but just, I'd say, a little bit more of a traditional layout, something in more closely in the vein of like a Max Bill watch from Junghans. So the dimensions on here: 40 millimeter case, 10.7 millimeters thick, including the crystal, of course, 48 millimeters lug to lug, full stainless steel, and fully matte blasted. So I think the matte blasted, again, like that finish just adds to the minimalist look here. It's not trying to be overly ornate or shiny or blingy. It's definitely very low key and very modern, which I think makes it actually a lot more versatile as well, because it's really just especially when we get it on the wrist, guys. It just is so low key, and that's something that I think a lot of people look for in this type of watch. They're not really looking for something to stand out. They're just looking for something that is just really balanced and looks great, which I have to agree are, you know, some key factors within the results of this watch. This sapphire does have an inner AR coating, but you can see that because of the crystal itself being domed, it does catch a lot of different reflections. So thankfully that AR coating is there. I would say that with the black dial, it probably does make some of the, or anthracite dial, it probably does make some of the reflections seem a little bit more prominent than if you were to get the pale silver or slash white dial model. In terms of this case, again, it's just really nice. You do get a very nice little push-pull crown here, and it works absolutely fine. And it's a decent size here, so it makes winding quite easy and actuation. So very nice proportions from there. It's not too big, doesn't stick out too far, but at the same time, it's also not too small in terms of the diameter on this. It actually is quite grippable and has a nice tactile engagement with the fingertip. Inside, although you can't see it, it has the Miyota 9015, and it does have this solid etched case back, which is screwed in versus screw down, which is why it doesn't have a huge amount of water resistance at 5 atmospheres or 50 meters. So, you know, this is fine in terms of getting water on it or anything like that. I wouldn't go out of my way to submerge this in water or anything, just because you can't really always ensure that the crown will be pushed in. But this, you know, all intents and purposes, this does have sealing and everything enough to where it can be submerged in water for, you know, basic things. But again, this isn't really the watch's purpose, so I wouldn't, you know, I definitely wouldn't buy this as a dedicated sports watch, but I think it definitely has enough water resistance to last in terms of every day. If it rains, if you got to do the dishes, if you get pushed into a pool and really quickly, and then you just kind of climb back out, you'll probably be absolutely fine. So when we get into this dial, some of the details here, let's check that out. It is a very clean layout. Of course, it is matte anthracite with that concave shape. It does have the date at 6 o'clock, which is nicely integrated thanks to a dark date disc with white font or gray font that kind of matches the dial aesthetic. So it's just very well integrated, very well thought out, which I really appreciate. It does have, of course, a matching matted handset there, so these are non-reflective, and you can see they do have a matte texture to them, which is really nice and just fits with the overall theme really beautifully. Water resistance, again, 5 atmospheres or 50 meters, 20 millimeter lug width, black calf leather strap, which tapers from 20 down to 17 millimeters, and then you also get quick release spring bars built in, which is nice, and then the side buckle is also matching matte blast, so very cool. It totally does the job, just feels like a complete watch. Again, although it's very simple, I think thematically everything is very tidy and well sorted, and of course it's pretty well spec'd for the money, which is great. So with all that said, let's actually get this piece on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay, as you can see on my 7 1/4 to 7.5 inch wrist, this thing wears beautifully. Check out the profile on wrist. It just lays, and then even though the you know, the lugs kind of begin at the top of the case, it doesn't leave you a lot of gap underneath because those undercuts are really, really well placed on there, so you're getting less contact with your wrist, which means overall more comfort, more mobility, but you're still getting a lot of nice wrist presence. And of course, you know, up close, kind of wristy, there's going to be some distortion there versus if you look at it a little bit more realistically down on my wrist here, you can see it's really nicely centered, and then, you know, within the context of an entire human versus just a talking wrist, then you can pretty much understand that this would be really proportional. I know 40 millimeters is probably a little bit larger than most people like for this type of watch. But at the end of the day, 40 millimeters is a sweet spot. So if somebody's Googling 40 millimeter watch, this will pull up, which is great. Do I think that a 38 millimeter model would be great? Yeah, I think especially considering the bezel-less design and expansive dial, I think a 38 would be wonderful. I think it could even pull off a 37. I typically like to stay above that range for myself, just because I do have a larger wrist, and although in a bubble, just looking at the wrist and a watch on my wrist, I think they can look fine. I think overall, to my bodily proportions, I prefer to have a watch that's going to be 37 and a half, or 37 and some change kind of at the smallest, with kind of 38 being the sweet spot for this type of watch. And then, sports watches can range depending on kind of the design for the lugs and everything. But I think this looks really, really handsome. And you can see that the way that the light plays on it, it can really pick up some great grays and then some natural black tones, and it still stays very, very legible with a nice contrast on the white markers there. So very, very cool. There isn't any lume on this watch, so this is definitely more of a dedicated dress style watch, so very casual, not really trying to be sporty. Although I think with that matte blasted case, it does give you a nice sporty aesthetic. Definitely leaning more on the modern side, which is really nice. So what we'll do is we can do some low light transition without the lume and get into some closing thoughts. Okay, we'll go ahead and hit the lights here. All right, already got my off-camera light here just to give you guys an idea of what this watch is going to render like in less than optimal lighting. You can see even in that transitional lighting, the contrast on the dial is still quite apparent, and you can even tell the time without any lume, which is pretty insane. So like just having very faint light reflecting off the dial here, not even directly shining on it, you can see that it still is quite legible, which is pretty cool. It definitely will disappear at times, right, if you get into complete darkness, but it is nice to see how a watch renders in terms of its color palette, the textures, the finishes, and you can see that matte finish there on the case is very consistent, and it just reflects and bounces light and absorbs light in a very nice uniform way, so it doesn't mess with the eyes too much. And then that dial itself actually looks like it has some kind of warmer tones compared to a regular black there, so that's nice. And that anthracite color I think is pretty accurate, because you are getting a really true kind of more than just a faded black or a typical gray. You are getting some nice warm tones, which again help make this watch very versatile. So very, very cool. And you can see that leather strap definitely has a very nice sheen to it as well. Quite pliable and fits really nice on the wrist. So really kind of quality package for under $500 from a legitimate German brand, although it'd be a newer brand, founded back in 2016. It's still it still feels a little bit, I'd say, I don't know, it just sits a little bit better with me than some other watches that might have more of a German Bauhaus design, but just really don't have any ties to that design aesthetic, in terms of the way that the brand is run, or the folks that are really pushing that aesthetic. So for me, it just, there's something it adds a little extra. Now I don't think that these are fully in-house manufactured in Germany. I don't have that fantasy or anything like that, but it is a German run brand, run by folks that really care about this design language, who know a little bit about it and aren't just going to copy and paste, but instead are going to add some of their own flair and flavor into the pot. And I appreciate what they're bringing to the table. So closing thoughts on the wrist, it wears really nicely, super clean, very low profile. The sides should easily slip underneath any cuff, and then that all matte finish adds a more casual versatility for something that can be dressed up when paired with a suit or business formal attire, but also easily be dressed down with a black t-shirt and some shorts and sneakers. And it's also aided, by the full 40mm sizing. So it's not gonna look undersized if you're gonna be dressed very casual. It's still gonna have a bit more of a sporty footprint, although it's, not full on overpowering in terms of having that sports watch aesthetic. So in terms of model variants, this is available with a white dial, and then in comparable models, yeah, there's tons of fashion brands that kind of imitate German minimalist design, but Sternglass can offer you kind of the genuine article for under 500 bucks, which I really appreciate that. Bottom line, this is a well-designed and well-spec'd piece, executed really nice. It's a wonderful, modern, everyday dress watch that just seems to kind of work in most any situation, apart from dedicated sportswear. Again, I think this is going to be really great. So the folks at Sternglass, when I reached out to them, they actually offered a 10% discount code, which is average bros 10. So I'll leave that in the description, as well as put a little link there if you want to just have it auto apply to your cart. I don't get any type of rewards or anything like that from this, but it does help track if my video gets any traction for their brand, and then it can promote future collaborations. You guys know me, I pretty much only feature stuff that actually interests me, that I like, and that I think adds some level of value to the market and to the audience that I share it with. But yeah, I just can't obviously buy a new watch 3 to 5 days a week for the rest of my life. So having brands send stuff in really means a lot and helps the channel keep going, and it gives me more experience with watches I wouldn't otherwise maybe have the chance to check out. So with that said, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked the video, please do hit like, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.